Hello and welcome to the Macabre Motel. Room 210 is reserved and waiting for you. This is Dead One Rolling, and come on inside. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm sure most of you realize that these channels are usually run from a script. Well, I'm not going to do that today. Today I'm going to run things from a freeform perspective and just let whatever happens happen. What I want to tell you about is a little bit about the house that I grew up in. One of the best ways to learn about a person is to know a little bit about where they come from and their past. So I'm just going to tell you about the house that I grew up in and what to me was the scariest thing that happened to me personally in that house. Okay, so the house that I lived in when I was growing up, I lived in that house until I was about 26 and a half years old. It was a very old house. It only had 4 rooms. It was very old and it was very isolated. Probably the closest person, closest neighbor would have been my aunt and uncle, and they lived way up on top of the ridge. Pretty much, they had a direct view of the roof, and that was about it. They were the closest, and there was nothing else within sight range of the house. Like I said, it was only 4 rooms. Believe it or not, it still had an outhouse. It did not have indoor plumbing. We had to literally carry and transport water from a spring up to the house itself. So this was a really, really, really old house. Now, when I was growing up, I didn't really realize that there was anything different or wrong with my house compared to anybody else's. I honestly, until I went to school, didn't know that my house was any different. I honestly thought everybody heard and saw and experienced the things that we did at my house in their house too. So those weird noises and the things that you see moving and the extra shadows, I thought everybody dealt with that. While some of it could be scary, I was so used to it that I really didn't pay it that much attention. Throughout my life, there was a lot of weird, strange things that happened in this house. And maybe I'll tell you about some of that here and there as we go. But probably the scariest thing that ever happened when I was about 17. And I don't know what changed or altered in the house itself that brought in something so dark, because up until then, the things we had dealt with in the house were never really harmful or truly scary. They were just there. Harmless things that we were just used to sharing the space with. Now, the way this house was set up, it didn't have any closets. It was a square, box-like structure that was divided into 4 equal parts. 2 of those parts were bedrooms. Now, it didn't have any closets, so up until I was about 14 or so, both rooms had like a corner of the room that was used kind of like an open-air closet with a rod across there to hang clothes on. Then, in my bedroom especially, being a teenage girl and liking to collect, I guess you'd say, clothes, we put in some fairly big dressers that would hold them all, so I could take that down in my room and have more usable space, which worked out fine. Now, I lived here alone with my mother, so it was just the 2 of us. And in her room, she still had that rod setup going on. And it was at the bottom of her bed in the corner. So, for, whatever reason, when they built that house, neither one of them had closets. But mine, I had put in extra drawers. Hers, she still had the setup that was there when we moved there. Now, when this happened, there had been some really strange things happening in the house itself. There had always been, noises at night and movement and shadows. Those things weren't any different or any stranger than usual. But what started to happen was this knocking sound. And it was really weird because it would start on one wall and it would go like that all the way down that wall, and it would just circle the entire room. And for some reason, even though I was used to hearing really odd things at night, the knocking unnerved me. It unnerved me to the point that I couldn't sleep, I couldn't rest. And after a couple of weeks of hearing it, I finally, told my mom, I was like, Mom, does that knocking not keep you up at night? And she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you hearing? And so one night we decided that because I was getting terrified and getting all dark-eyed and fearful looking because I couldn't sleep, we decided to wait till it started and then she would come in there so she could hear it. Because even though the rooms were side by side, in her bedroom you couldn't hear anything. Even when I stepped directly from my doorway into her doorway, and, the one wall of the two bedrooms was a shared wall, you could hear it in my room, but you heard absolutely nothing in hers. And it was really weird because the wall that was shared was being knocked on as well, and you couldn't hear that at all on her side of the wall. So we picked a weekend night and decided we would find a way for her to hear it. And I lay in there and I waited for it to start. It made about 2 circles around the room, and I hollered for her to come in there. Now, as soon as she stepped into the room, it stopped. It completely stopped. Mid-circuit, it just quit, as if it had never been going on. But she could see how scared I was, so she knew I was telling her the truth, and it kind of confused her that she couldn't catch it doing it. And that kind of worried her, because she was afraid that maybe this was something different than what we were used to, and maybe she needed to kind of keep an eye on me because something else may be going on rather, other than our normal nightly noises. So we agreed to have her step back into her bedroom and wait again, one more time to try to see if it would start up and she could catch a show from it. If she waited until it started again and jumped in there a little bit quicker. Well, about 15 minutes, I guess, thereabouts, it started again. But this time it was a different kind of knocking. It went from being to getting really hyper. It went to, and it was just circling and circling. And it was almost as if it was angry. And so I hollered at her again, and she jumped in the room as soon as I hollered her name, and nothing. Dead silence. By that point, I was just absolutely terrified because I honestly believed I had made it angry by even telling her about it to start with. So I asked her if I could come in her room and sleep that night because, like I said, I was just shaking. I was terrified. Didn't know what to do. Didn't know how to handle it. So I go in her room and I sleep down at the bottom of the bed. She sleeps up at the top. And I'm right down next to where her little rod is, where the clothes and her dresses and stuff are. And she had one that had a dry cleaner. It had just been cleaned. So it had the dry cleaner's plastic over it. And so I'm laying down there and I finally fall asleep because I just knew that whatever that was in my bedroom was going to follow me into her room. So I was a bit worried about that and was having trouble falling asleep. And when I did fall asleep, I started having this really horrible nightmare. And I can't remember what it was about, but I remember wishing I would wake up. And all of a sudden, I could not breathe. I could not breathe. I don't care how brave you are. When you feel like you can't get air into your lungs, you start to panic. So I'm kicking around and I'm trying to fight and I'm throwing the blankets off of me, and finally the light switches on. I can't get my eyes open. I can just tell that there is a light on through my eyelids. I can't get my eyelids open. And I'm panicking and I'm trying to scream, but I can't get any air into my lungs. And I realize that something has a hold of me. And my mother had jumped up and switched the lights on and come running back to the bed, apparently with a pair of scissors in her hand, because the next thing I know, she is peeling. I felt something metal against my throat, and of course it was cold because it was metal, and this was the middle of the night, and that was kind of startling. And I couldn't figure out what she was doing, and I didn't know whether to fight her or not, and she finally gets the plastic cut enough that she can start ripping it off. And that's what it was. There was the dry cleaner's bag, the plastic, was wrapped around my head. Perfectly wrapped. It was perfectly wrapped in perfect layers, and when she finally got it cut off, she was looking at the top of the bag where the hanger goes through the top so that you can hang it up with the bag still on it. Ironically enough, the bag was in perfect condition. I didn't accidentally tangle myself up in it and pull it off of the dress. The hole was still in perfect condition. The plastic wasn't torn in any way at the top to show that it had been torn down. It was as if you had just lifted it up and over and off of the dress and wrapped it around my head. And that was probably the scariest thing that ever happened to me. To know that something was strong enough in will and physical force to attempt to take my life. Because up until that time, nothing had ever tried to kill me yet. That truly scared the daylights out of me. And things only got worse from there. It was a very slow progression. And it would stop and start. It wasn't always a constant thing that was there. But over several years, it did get worse. Honestly, I think the only thing that finally drew it away was that it found an easier target later on. But I never quite got over being awoken in the middle of the night to find myself smothering. That truly terrified me, and I hope to never have to go through anything like that again. But that is a little bit about me and about the house that I grew up in. And maybe that'll help explain some of why the paranormal and the darker side of life has always been such a fascination for me. Like I said, until I went to school, I thought that was part of everybody's life. Everybody's house had these things inside it, and it was something that everybody dealt with. It was normal. But like I said, I do hope that you learned a little bit about me, about who I am, where I came from, and I hope you enjoyed the freeform format. Hope it give it a little bit looser feel, more natural. Just me and you having a conversation talking. But that's it. So this has been Dead One Rolling at the Macabre Motel, room 210, saying talk to you soon, and thank you for watching. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us. If you like this episode, please feel free to hit the like button. If you want to hear more stories, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thank you again for your time. This has been Dead One Rolling, and I will talk to you again soon.